afternoon. Welcome to everybody who is joining us live today on this PM radio episode. The topic today is on benefits management, and we will be focusing on Project X. Now, I would like to encourage our audience to watch our previous episode on the same topic, where we hosted Dr. Richard Kirkham. We introduced the topic of benefits management, differentiated between value and benefit, and we touched on some few examples of successful versus problematic projects. Now, Project X is a large research project funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, which is part of Innovate UK. The main goal is to revolutionize the way we deliver government major projects. The Project X includes a large number of researchers who are part of universities, UK universities, and they are key researchers in their fields. They are collaborating with industry partners as well to provide this world-class research. We are lucky today to be able to speak to three of them. Now, historically, project management has focused heavily on efficiency and effectiveness. The aim has always been to deliver within time, within budget, and to the agreed level of quality. However, recently, there has been a shift towards a more forward-looking approach where we deliberately plan and manage benefits that we want from the change we are implementing through these projects and programs. This becomes a necessity when we are discussing major government projects, which attract a huge amount of spending or funding and are set out to solve forecasted future problems. The problem is what happens when the landscape of these future problems changes. What happens when our perception of the problem, hence our perception of the solution, changes? Can we accept achieving different benefits from those that we planned in the beginning to achieve? And if yes, what implications does this have for the way we justify our future spending? It's an honor and a pleasure today to have Professor Terry Williams, Dr. Richard Kirkham, and Dr. Hank Vo to answer these questions and share their views with us. And to you, our lovely audience, of course, you can comment and you can ask questions in the chat area and on YouTube, and we will be addressing these at the final part of our episode today. So without further ado, let's welcome our guests to our virtual video with us. Hello, hi, Richard and Hank. Nice to have you today.
Nice to see you, Dania. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, I'd like to say thank you to Daniel Nichols, who put us in contact. Daniel from APM. Although we know each other from previously, I'm proud to say that Richard is my former PhD supervisor, and Terry was my external examiner. So this is bringing a lot of memories, a lot of nice memories, of course. And welcome to Hank as well. Can we start by briefly, each one of you, introducing yourselves to the audience? What do you do and what was your contribution to Project X? Can we start with you, Terry, please?
Oh, that was unexpected. My name is Terry Williams. I was Dean of the Business School up in Hull and previously ran the Business School at Southampton. My research has always been in project management from the background of operations research. I was involved, as indeed Richard was, from the very first days in Project X. And part of Project X's remit was to try and get some big funding. But in the interim, we got a lot of funding from PMI to do projects, and so because I have a close link with PMI. And one of those projects was the project we're going to talk about today, which is a benefits management project.
Thank you, Terry. Richard?
Hi, I'm Richard Kirkham. I'm a reader in civil engineering in the Department of Mechanical Aerospace and Civil Engineering at the University of Manchester, where, of course, Dania is one of our alumnus. We're very proud as well, I might say, Dania. I've been at Manchester for nearly a decade now. My main teaching interests are in risk management, civil engineering practice, and I also teach a construction management professional practice for our long-running MSc programme. My main research is around project delivery and the application of quantitative methods to risk. So I've done quite a bit of work around whole life costing, and that's kind of how I got involved in Project X, and in particular applying some of my expertise around whole life costing to the government major projects portfolio.
Thank you, Richard. Hank?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hang Võ. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm currently a second-year PhD student at the University of Hull. My research is funded by the Economic and Social Research Council through Project X, and is supported by the UK Infrastructure and Project Authority, or the IPA. So with this research, I aim to bring together project management and policy implementation research to understand how policy turns into projects, especially focusing on the gap between the policy intent and the actual policy outcomes, and how that gap evolves over time. And then with this study, I also seek to understand what constitutes policy and project success, and the dynamic nature and moving perspective on success across time.
Thank you. Thank you, Hang, and again, welcome to all. Now that Terry has already mentioned the contribution to Project X, Richard, would you like to add to these? Are you still contributing? I know the majority of the work, all of the work, is on benefits management. Can you just brief us a little bit on this, and if you are still, there are ongoing projects on this?
Yeah, sure, Danny, that's fine. So the answer to your question is yes, Project X is still alive and well. Our main funding from the Economic and Social Research Council came to an end in December. So we're in the process at the moment now of organising our governance to transition to a new operating model going forward. But we're absolutely committed to continuing the work that we're doing in bringing academics, civil servants, industry professionals and representatives from professional bodies together to shape kind of the future landscape around research in this area. As Terry might have alluded to, I was involved with him right at the beginning of setting up Project X with Terry Harrington, who was then head of Portfolio Insight in the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. I was seconded into Cabinet Office to help that piece of work and other things as well. And in addition to all that, I lead our transformation theme as well. So I've done some projects around government transformation, looking at risks, legacy ICT, behaviour change, and that kind of thing.
Excellent, brilliant. Thank you, Richard. And go to the main question, which is discussing one of the research that is published, and we can put a link to this below the video. One of the research outputs is titled Identifying and Realizing Project Benefits, a cross-national comparison of benefits management practices. It was comprised of 3 phases. Can you describe the research and take us through the main findings of this published research? Terry, if you like to start with this.
Okay, oh, I got an echo. This was funded by PMI, as I said. There were 4 universities involved, Richard at Manchester, and myself and Hang. When I say myself and Hang did 90% of the work of the whole project, but self and Hang at Hull. We also had Mike Bourne and others at Cranfield, and Paolo Quattroni and others up at Edinburgh. And it's 3 phases, as Daniel said. Essentially, what's supposed to happen, what does happen, and does it work with the 3 phases. So the first phase, we looked at 6 countries and a couple of supranational organisations to see what's actually in the books, what's supposed to happen, what formal methods are there. And we found they nearly all had benefits management frameworks, with 1 country didn't, but so we sort of ignored that after that. They were all very thorough for identifying benefits and cost-benefit analysis, not so much on ex-post benefits analysis, and even less on benefits management. But they all had very detailed rules for quantifying benefits, although the uniformity and so on across government varied. And we talked a little bit about risk management and so on. But that led to lots of questions. We thought, well, that's what's supposed to happen. Does it actually happen? And we looked quite closely in the US, Canada, Norway, and Australia and the UK, get my countries right. We found a wide range guidelines and practices, and a tendency towards tailoring them for particular departments. Transport was all very good, and infrastructure seemed to be a long way ahead of other sorts of projects. But we looked across the board at transformation and so on. They were all very good at benefits identification and cost benefit analysis, and they sort of bore down quite hard on that, and they knew about optimism bias, although there was quite a lot of game in the system to get things through. But there was a clear emphasis on you've got to get the project through government, and once you've done that, you can say, hey, and there was a lot less work on benefits expectations through the project life cycle, not a lot in practice to capture the changes in benefits, not a lot on managing benefits, and not a lot of risk management about benefits, a lot about risk management on the actual delivery. And long-term ex-post evaluations were considered really important, but not often done. And there wasn't a lot of standardization. So we had a mixed picture, and we found lots of barriers to things working, but lots of facilitators. And that was all very useful and interesting and led to some changes. But it raises a range of questions as to how this actually worked in practice. And clearly, benefits management seems quite simple, but it in fact is much more complicated, as hopefully we'll capture. So we hang, I think, particularly, and also Richard can talk more about phase 3. But I'll just say briefly, we studied 3 projects in detail and came up with some very specific recommendations about definitions, tools, stakeholders, reviews, about the move to project, so business as usual, post-project and sponsors, and changes and narratives, and those sorts of things. So our first 2 phases got some very useful information. The really hard thought in phase 3, I think is still, some of it's still to go, although we did come up with some interesting conclusions.
Oh, thank you, Terry. I will go back to this later now. Hank, I think you can tell us more about phase 3, which is part of your PhD, right?
It's not really part of my PhD, but my PhD developed on, like a bit on the findings from the phase 3. It's about the continuity of the benefit and the fluidity of benefits. So in the phase 3 of the benefits project that Terry just mentioned, we consider the basis of the espouse and use benefits management methods, and try to draw conclusions about how effective they should be. So basically, in this phase, we describe the actuality of benefits management through the 3 in-depth UK case studies that we collected between 2018 and 2019. So we were talking about the last projects here. So we look at a health project, a construction project, and a central government project. And the benefits could be like saving time, higher safety, or preserve heritage. So we explore the changing nature and the meanings of benefits. And also a very important part of phase 3 is to theorize benefits and try to produce a kind of like conceptual paper of what makes a benefit. And this is the work that significantly contributed by our colleagues from the University of Edinburgh. So in this study, in terms of theory, we embrace the multiplicity and continuous chains of benefits. We apply the Latourian script metaphor to show the empirical phenomenon of changing benefits. So there were many important findings that coming from the phase 3. First is about the kind of the definition of benefits. So we found that there was a practical desire to use commonly understood terms to define the benefits. But we recommend that rather than focus on this kind of general terms, we should focus on defining the processes to define terms. And most importantly, we recommend to continuously checking the validity and kind of like the professionally agreed definitions of benefits over time. And the second important finding is about like designing the tools to support the benefits realization and change management. So we recommend that the tools for benefits management should really recognize the impossibility of capturing a true permanent representation of benefit. Instead, we should like create some kind of like open space for discussing and recognizing the plurality of benefits and their evolution. And especially we have to combine both quantitative and qualitative evaluations of benefits, not just only focus on the like financial benefits. And most importantly, we have to continuously monitor the change in the project scope and the benefit definition. And then we also talk to we try to look at the stakeholder as well, and how like it can have an impact on the definition of benefits. So we found that having kind of like communication with stakeholder and seeing the issues from different perspective is very important for the success of the project. So we recommend that like communicating with stakeholder, the often overlooked non-financial and wider social benefits, because these benefits might be of most value to them and the reason why the project was initiated in the first place. And then we also look at the benefits management after the project closure. So we found that attention or the interest in the benefits tail off significantly after the project closure, especially for those non-financial benefits. So we recommend that ongoing review and reporting of benefits and benefit changes should be done by the permanent organization that take over the project output. And most importantly, like we need to agree in advance how long the benefits should be tracked and measured. This is very easy to do for the financial benefits, because when you do the cost benefits measurement, then you can have the time that you do the net present value estimation. But then for those non-financial benefits or not easy to quantify benefits, then like it's a challenge, and we need to agree how long we want to capture and measure them. And then in terms of managing and capturing changes to the benefits, we can see that like from the people we interviewed and from the case study, there's some like enthusiastic people who want to capture those changes, so they try to put in place the process, but it's not enough. Because like in theory, okay, capturing change is easy to say, but in practice it's not that simple to do. So we recommend those benefits management frameworks to be developed to recognize the fluidity of benefits. And we think about agile or test and learn approaches can be kind of like beneficial here. And then last but not least, it's about non-quantifiable benefits. Like I said before, we really focus on the financial benefits because anything that's easy to put them monitor on it, then it's get a lot of attention and it's easier to monitor as well. But then there are also some other kind of like wider social benefits that very difficult to quantify, but maybe they are the main reason why the project were initiated in the first place. So we recommend the use of narrative, would provide a useful means of expressing these kind of benefits. And we also strongly suggest that like care is taken to avoid over reliance on easily quantifiable and financial benefits.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. And this is all published, Hang, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Phases 1 and 2 are published.
Is phase 3 published, or is it still on?
I think we have got a white paper.
White paper.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we can share these outputs with everybody who's watching. Richard, you are also part of this research. So I wanted to ask you a question, just reflecting on what Hank said, and then you can share with us your experience with this research. For how long do you think should we track and measure benefits as part of this? Let's get it easy, and let's talk about financial ones, not non-financial ones.
That's extremely difficult to do in terms of determining a time horizon. I mean, some people might say that you would think about electoral cycles, perhaps, but one of the criticisms that we've kind of emphasised in our research is that decision-making often around investments in major projects in government are very much political rather than influenced by economic cycles. And actually, economic cycle, the decision making in economic cycles probably makes more sense. I think the challenge really is about making sure that there is a person in place, or a persons, or a group of people that have the remit to continue to track benefits, not just the ones that are in the business case, but also ones that might emerge as a consequence of changes to the environment in which the operations that are delivered from the project exist within. If you kind of look at the Cabinet Office letters that senior responsible owners sign when they agree to take on a GMPP project, they are saying, yes, I will be accountable for delivery to Parliament. I'm happy to go before a select committee and get a good grilling. But I will also be responsible for the delivery of benefits as well. And it does seem rather curious that people are willing to sign that letter knowing full well that they probably won't be anywhere near the project when it goes into operations. So there's this peculiar paradox, isn't there, that the Treasury are looking for a positive benefit to cost ratio, but actually when we get into the business of delivering services to citizens, no one seems interested. So everything's all about getting the approval to do the project rather than actually focusing on the benefits. And we did a lot of work early on to try and get the Public Accounts Committee and the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee to think about this problem. So we was really encouraged back in 2019 to see Sir Bernard Jenkins' report emphasise the fact that projects are not just a means to an end. You know, they are the enabler of the delivery of benefits. And therefore, whilst it's important to scrutinise the delivery of projects and programmes in government, we also should think about how we're making sure that those projects and programmes are set up in a way that they can deliver benefits in an optimal way. So in the true kind of tradition of an academic, I've not given you the right answer or an answer to your question. But what I hope I've been able to do is give you a bit of an explanation of why I think that particular question you pose is really quite complex.
Yes, it is.
Well, the other problem, tracking benefits sounds quite easy, but when you get to the end of a long project and the world's completely different to when you started, what's actually benefiting from that project and what the world has changed is quite difficult. Hang and I did a long interview with somebody in the EU who was part of approving projects. And we had a long discussion on how you identify the benefits and plan them. And we said, well, at the end of the project, you track them. He said, oh, no, you can't tell what's the change in the environment, what's the change in the economy. You can't not have the project and have the project and compare the two. So it's often really quite difficult to know what are the benefits accruing from that particular project.
Yeah, I think Terry's hit the nail on the head there. I think we referred to it in the paper as the disentangling of benefits. So you have a benefits map, possibly, in your business case, which kind of might loosely align with the benefit categories that Han referred to when she was talking about, the identification stage. But then when you kind of go into operations, it might be that new things that have occurred as a consequence of changes in the policy environment or changes in the local environment which the project is situated in will have a big influence on the delivery of those benefits. So it's a tricky task, sort of like going back and saying, right, that decision to do that particular part of the project led directly to this benefit. It could be that the benefit has occurred through emergence, i.e., the characteristics of a complex system.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to ask another question, which is in the same direction. Maybe I'm going to ask it in a different way. Now, you've probably touched on it so far. How can you account for a change in perception and maybe change in policy? And you mentioned that we should be measuring emergent benefits. Now, the idea of measuring emergent benefits or tracking them, regardless for how long, let's say 10 years, 15 years, whatever. How would you then judge whether the project has been successful or not based on from the perspective of benefits? So let's steer away from the perspective of finishing in time within budget, the iron triangle, to a more broad perspective about have we achieved benefits? Now, when we ask ourselves this question, are we going to compare with the original business case benefits, or are we going to say, you know what, we haven't achieved those, we planned, but we've achieved all these emergent ones. Now, in your view, based on the people you interviewed and the research you did, do you think this is a justification still, and we can still say, yes, we've achieved the benefits, although not the one that we planned initially? Anyone who would like, Richard or Hank? I'm happy with.
Okay, I can begin if you wish. And then, okay. So I think Hang sort of alluded to this. There are sort of three main kind of stakeholder categories that the IPA benefits guidance identifies. So you've got government as one benefit kind of recipient, then you've got private sector partners, so the commercial organisations that are generally involved in delivering major projects in government, and then you've got a third category, which is the wider UK public. So the first two, kind of government and private sector, they're generally a little bit easy to identify in terms of the benefits, particularly the kind of the cash releasing benefits that you might see in government, or recovery benefits that you might see in the public sector. But sort of when it gets to wider UK public, it's a much harder thing to do, because value's in the eye of the beholder. And what we do know from our research is that a benefit that might be perceived by one stakeholder may actually be seen as a disbenefit to another stakeholder, and reconciling that can be really quite a challenging thing to do. To answer your question, it's a really interesting one, Dania, because I think what we're kind of talking about now is evaluation. Now, policy evaluation has been kind of, it's a well-trodden path, I would say, not just in academia, but in government as well. And there is very prescriptive guidance on how it should be done. That's the Magenta book, published by the Treasury, and that's been updated recently to help focus on complex kind of policy objectives as well, entrenched social issues, for example. But we've also seen quite regular criticism of a failure to actually undertake rigorous evaluation of government spending. And I think most of the viewers may have seen the newspaper articles recently about the Department for Levelling Up Communities and Local Government's white paper on levelling up. So I don't think anybody would disagree that the content of that is good. It states ambitions, which I think we all can kind of buy into. But the National Audit Office have raised concerns about the lack of evidence around evaluation of previous spending within the department. So have what they have done, what works, basically, has that expenditure proven to deliver benefits or not? So there is kind of work going on across government with Cabinet Office, Treasury, and people within spending departments to try and think about how evaluation can be improved. And I think that's great news, because it actually brings this work that we're talking about today into sharp focus. It sends a very clear signal, I think, that benefits work is a really important part of evaluation. If you're going to evaluate public spending properly, you really do need to be much better at understanding your benefits case. So I think that that's the key message, really, that I would wish to get across. Hang, is that something that you're largely in agreement with?
Oh yeah. So basically, I just want to touch on that a bit. So basically, when I interview the experts for my PhD, so the expert is the one that have extensive experience in delivering the public projects or formalizing the policy. So most of them, they talk about the relationship between policy and project, and how, we evaluate the success of policy, and how the success of project can link back to the success of policy. So most of them, think that to be able to evaluate the success is very complicated, because success is really subjective, and the way that we measure the success is not consistent across department, and also the maturity of the department in terms of evaluating the success or kind of like managing the benefits also different. So some of my interviewees did say that, in their department, they do track the benefits and try to evaluate the benefits right after the project closure. But most of that is focused on the financial benefits. And the reason that they do it, because, for some projects, when you estimate the financial benefits that you can achieve from your project, then after the project closure, it goes to the ordinary the regular budget of the department, and it's become the public expense, and that means that it will be scrutinized by the NGO and like order organization, and like so for financial benefits, it's more chance that can be tracked and evaluated. But for those that like wider social benefits, it's really difficult to track and monitor, and basically some my interviewers say that they don't have the resource to do it, and to do it for how long, and like why we have to do that. That is what my interviewees often like ask me. So yeah.
Hang and Richard and I did a different, entirely different study, which was about the governance of projects, and we looked at all the reviews that had been undertaken of major projects. And it was interesting that most of what was done was about, are you going to deliver the project on time, on cost, as originally specified, and very little about, are the benefits still relevant? Are you going to capture the benefits? And we did looked at one quite unsuccessful and quite politically scary project, which we won't mention the name of, but all the way through they were on track to deliver, even though the project was never going to work. But they had a project, and this is the project management mindset, they had a project defined, they were going to do it, come what may, and they did it. But it's really the basic business case at the beginning that needed looking at. So it is very difficult with a project to raise the minds of that project team to the benefits. And anyway, that might have them going one way and the other. And it's very difficult to keep track on your set goal when everything's moving around you.
And then the findings from my current study is that, for non-major project, non-GMPP project, then basically they don't really have the system in place to track the benefits after the project closure. Then we talk about the GMPP project or the major public projects that are monitored by the IPA on the GMPP portfolio. Then okay, this project, during the time that they on the portfolio, they're going to be monitored by the IPA. But normally, like attention to the benefits is peak in gate 0, like to initiate the project, and gate 5 to exit the project. And when this project exit the portfolio, the IPA will like hand over the responsibility to track the benefits to the department. So it's really rests on the department and the organization to do their job, to put in place an appropriate system to track the benefits, and to make sure that there's somebody there to be responsible and accountable for the realization of benefits.
Thank you all for that. Obviously, if we had more time, I would have asked more and more questions about this very controversial topic. But let me move to something more practical. Let's talk about specific examples. So each one of you probably worked on specific projects. If you can tell us a little bit about these specific projects you studied as part of your research journey. Maybe start with Richard. I know you can talk about prisons or other projects if you wish.
You're on mute, Richard.
Yeah, if you can unmute yourself, Richard.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's got to be done, hasn't it? We've got to turn yourself on mute. Okay, so yeah, we've been doing a bit of work on prison estate reform, which is a really kind of interesting story, I think, about how a project and a program of work kind of changed quite substantially as a consequence of major policy changes. So if I take you back to 2015-17 Conservative government, around about 2016, a white paper was published on prison safety and reform. And this report came on the back of major prison disturbances at prisons in Bedford, Birmingham and Swaleside. So they were pretty extreme events, and there needed to be some action taken to create more capacity and deliver perhaps more humane conditions for prisoners. So on the back of that policy intent, the Prison Estate Transformation Programme was launched in 2016, and that had an ambition to deliver around about 10,000 new prison places alongside renewals and reorganisation of the wider prison service. So it was quite an ambitious programme, and the key thing, it had the word transformation in it. So it wasn't necessarily just about building new jails or refurbishing the ones that currently exist. It's about new operating models as well, new ways of doing things within the permanent organisation. Unfortunately, due to a number of factors, which included inter alia lack of support financially from the Treasury, the Ministry of Justice cancelled the prison estate transformation programme in 2018. So the Public Accounts Committee carried out an inquiry into this. They cited lack of Treasury commitment, i.e. funding. They cited a lack of strategic thinking within the Ministry of Justice more generally. So the kind of upshot of that was that we ended up with a new prisons programme. So the key word there was transformation was left out. It was ostensibly about just building new prisons. And that programme is currently live, and there is a project that's due to close out very shortly at Five Wells in, I think that's in Northamptonshire, and then there will be Glenparva in Leicestershire, potentially Full Sutton near York coming on stream as well. But what's really interesting about that particular project is that clearly identifying benefits of prison projects can be quite difficult. The general public often perceive these types of projects to deliver more disbenefits than benefits. So quite a lot of the business case was around employment during the construction phase. But there was also a recognition that local communities as well benefit from the presence of a prison. So, for example, taxi drivers providing transport between the railway station and the prison, local shops that might be able to sell things to visitors and to the workforce that are located nearby. But yeah, there's generally a heavy focus on the kind of construction phase and the benefits that might be delivered through apprenticeships, through local employment in the supply chain, using local material suppliers and so forth. But on reflection, looking at the kind of history of that whole programme from PETP through to new prisons, what we also know is that there was a significant amount of ministerial churn within the department during that period. So looking at my notes here, back in 2018, Rory Stewart was the Minister for Prisons. He was then succeeded by Robert Buckland, then Lucy Fraser, then Alex Chalk, then Lucy Fraser again, and the current Prisons Minister is Victoria Atkins. So when you've got that level of ministerial change within a department that's overseeing a programme where the delivery of benefits has a significant relationship with the operational delivery profession, you do have a potential challenge there around actually maintaining a focus on the original benefits that were in the business case. And it is quite proper within a democratic system such as the UK that the government of the day is empowered to do what it wants to do based on the mandate that's been given to it by the electorate. But that has consequences for those that are delivering projects and those that are trying to deliver the benefits, because it's difficult to do that when the goalposts may be changing. So that's been a kind of a really fascinating study. More generally, yes, it would be remiss of me not to mention High Speed 2, because that is a very kind of controversial project as well. We know now that the eastern leg of High Speed 2 from Birmingham to Leeds and York will not happen. And that's really quite worrying, I think, for people in my neck of the woods here in York, who saw potentially the benefits that faster rail might deliver to the region. But it's a great kind of story in the sense that when it was first kind of promoted, and I've got the business case from 2013 in front of me, it was based on a very classic Mintzberg strategy. So you had this strategic headline of engine for growth, and then below that you had three key strategic enablers. Capacity, i.e. more new railway creates additional capacity for passengers and freight. Secondly, connectivity, so linking larger cities together in a faster way could deliver benefits, and that's a classic view of the DFT way of looking at benefits for rail projects. And then finally, regeneration and growth as well. But as the High Speed 2 programme has evolved, we've noticed that the strapline of engine for growth has been dropped. And I think that there are questions now being asked about whether the original business case around capacity and connectivity and regeneration still stacks up in the context of a significantly rescoped programme of railway that will no longer go to Leeds and instead will be replaced by potentially east-west connectivity as well. But like these long duration linear infrastructure programs that progress through different parliaments, you were always potentially exposed to some of the threats that environment presents.
Yeah, definitely. And then the problem is, at the end of the day, even if you change the scope a little bit, you can't just say, I'm not going to do the project, because you spend lots of money, and you have to carry on even with the de-scoped version of it, with a de-scoped version of the benefits as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the sunk cost benefits, the sunk cost fallacy is a really important point. But I know Terry were just keen to say something on Stonehenge as well, because that's the A303 project has been something we're quite interested in as well.
Yeah, that would be another brilliant example. Terry.
Yeah, one of the examples we looked at, or particularly looked at in our phase 3 study, was Stonehenge. For those who don't know, I don't know how wide this goes out. Stonehenge is a World Heritage Site, so it's very valuable, but it is a terrible, terrible traffic jam next to it. So the thought was to build a tunnel underneath it. And just in those few sentences, you can see we raise all sorts of issues. And that project, we thought, did a really, really good job of going right there, departmental priorities, which should always be the start of any project, to think, what is your government department trying to do? So supporting the economy, improving safety, improving the quality of life, and so on. And they split it down and said, what are the benefits we're looking for? So there was a waste from the building, there was community connectivity, there was look at the use of cars and how fast they went, and the look of non-motorized facilities, cycling, walking, and so on. Thought about safety, a lot of things about the World Heritage Sites, because unlike Liverpool, we didn't want to lose the World Heritage Site status for that. So there's a lot about conserving the stones and what happens if you find stones underneath. There's also stuff about enhancing the landscape, reducing light pollution, access to the countryside. And they did a very, very good job of quantifying what could be quantified, finding proxies for quantification for those that couldn't, so questionnaires, and asking people, what do you think about this, how important is this, and so on. Trying to marry the different stakeholders, so the people who want to go and meet there every summer solstice, and as far as they were concerned, you shouldn't have building anywhere near, and the motorists who might want to just drive all the way through the stones and not bother, and trying to marry all these different interests. And it's very complicated. We think they did a really good job. Whether the project will go ahead, we don't know, but we think that was a good example, and that's actually, I think it might be in the paper, it's certainly in a book we're bringing out soon, that a copy of that benefits map, and how starting with the departmental priorities, that flows out to the different benefits that should accrue and that they would want to measure as they go along. I think Hang has another example. Is that right?
Thank you, Terry. Brilliant examples from different projects. I think that's very useful when you put things in context. Hank, can you tell us a little bit about the Olympics? I think you've got some knowledge on that.
So the Olympics 2012 is actually not the project that I study in detail, but it's it's the project that repeatedly mentioned by my interviewees of my PhD study when I interview them about asking them about the view on policy and project success, and then they tell me this kind of story about the perception of success is really subjective, and it's kind of like fluidity, and it can change over time. And Olympics 2012 is a good example of that. So basically, as you know, in the Olympic case, so before the game took place, it's cost a significant more than expected to deliver the game. So I think the initial budget was around 3 or 4 billion pounds, and then eventually it's cut around at least 9 billion pounds. And recently, people even say that if you include all other additional costs, it may go up to from 15 billion to over 20 billion pounds cost in the project. So before the game happened, the project was considered kind of like a disaster in terms of project management success. But then right after the game, then the project was suddenly perceived as something like a massive success because it helped to bring attention to and boost economics for several, like poor and deprived area in London. And then people also talk about the environmental and legacy values that the project brought to London as well. But then in recent years, again, people start to question the longer term benefits and the impacts of the project. And with, like studies and research stating that, like its social and economic benefits are still far from clear, and they demand a better understanding of the value of the project. So I think, it's a very interesting example showing the dynamic nature of success, and success in this case very subjective and can change over time.
Yeah, which also highlights how important it is to stick to a time frame to evaluate these benefits and this success. Because as I said at the beginning, the people were not impressed, then they were impressed, and they are not impressed anymore afterwards. So it's very important to set a time frame, which is still a very complicated, maybe it's very difficult task.
But I mean, like the challenge here is that most of major projects, like it takes a very, very long time for their benefits and wider benefits to be realized. So I think, like it's also a challenging job to really set the time frame for the benefits realization as well.
It is definitely. I think we do it at the beginning just for the sake of the justification of the business. And as you said, there is always these non-quantifiable, non-financial benefits that are even more difficult to measure or to track over time. Very, very great examples. Thank you to all of you. I just wanted to, do you have anything to add?
Well, one comment. The theme of this session is about benefits management, which is a very difficult topic. You've moved us on to project success, which is an even more difficult topic. And what is a successful project? And we could have another hour just on that.
I know.
That is really difficult.
Yeah. The thing is, I don't know if you agree with me. I'm going to just say it there. It seems like project managers can never win in this game, because if you look at success from the iron triangle point of view, especially for major projects, you start up with very optimistic estimates of time and budget. Hence, it's rarely that you finish within budget and within time. Even if we look at it from the benefits perspective, it's even a more complicated perspective to look at, or more complex, because of the dynamics nature of the benefits. Because as you found in your research, we focus on it only for the sake of getting the justification. So it looks like this is, I'm starting to think that this might be the reason why it's always we feel that projects are failing if we look at them from these criteria, but maybe they are not really failing. We are failing to evaluate them using the right criteria. But that's, as you said, is a completely different topic for another session, maybe. I just wanted to highlight that project success models have been recently changed a lot from the iron triangle, trying to move to a view on benefits and adding benefits as one of the criteria. Anyone would like to comment on this? I know there was much time, but if you would like, Richard.
Yeah, I think probably just to say, I think you're right, Dania. I think there is a conversation that perhaps needs to be had about how we look at that whole question of success going forward. But I think it's also the right moment to perhaps just, reflect on the legacy of Dr. Martin Barnes, CBE, who was one of the founder members of the Association of Project Management. And Martin's PhD, which he undertook at the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology, which today is my department in Manchester, led to the Iron Triangle, or variously known as the Barnes Triangle as well. And Martin's work was kind of instrumental, really, in getting us to think about this idea of a project and something that can apply measurements to understand its performance. But of course, the Iron Triangle doesn't talk about benefits. It's very obvious that that element is missing. And I think certainly when the APM was formed, it was very kind of much focused on the value that project management can bring at the front end. So the brilliant work that Terry and Hang have done and the paper they wrote in production planning and control on the literature around front end is definitely worthy of reading for listeners that are here today, because I think there's a lot of really interesting and insightful stuff in that paper which can really focus our minds on what we need to do going forward. And of course, we talked down here in the last session about the Post Office Horizon project. That's now in the early stages of its public inquiry, and we will let that run its course. But a program, largest transformation program in Europe at the time, was lauded for being on time and on cost. But it's quite possibly now responsible for the largest miscarriage of justice in British legal history. So a very interesting case there to follow as that progresses. And I think there are other examples of less severe consequences that perhaps can be found elsewhere as well.
Definitely. Thank you, Richard. Let's move to some of the questions. I have a question about the framework that Hang is working on. You mentioned you are trying to theorize, maybe, or try to find a theoretical framework for benefits management, tracking, definition, and identification and tracking. Is this framework that is it something that can differentiate between stakeholders? So you would say that these stakeholders' benefits are the ones that are going to be tracked, or these stakeholders' benefits are more important than the other? You mentioned something about communication among stakeholders. How does this fit within this framework that you are working on?
So basically, especially for public projects and major projects, it attracts a lot of, attention from different stakeholders. And of course, for different stakeholders, the benefits of the project may be differently. So I think the most important thing is to find a balance between it in order to, capture the benefits. What I say here is that, the benefits normally we really focus on is the financial benefits. And sometimes those kind of financial benefits is not really benefit the end user or the wider community. But because our system currently is still heavily on, adjusting the cost benefits ratio before we can give approval for projects. So this is something that is very challenging. So our current system, our current study is encourage the inclusion of those non-financial benefits in order to test the feasibility of the project.
Mm-hmm. And based on your research, maybe this is also to Richard and Terry, I don't know if you found out about this, but ex post, whose benefits, talking about government projects, whose benefits are usually get achieved? Is it the public department that initiated the project? If we are talking about multiple stakeholders, end user, the department, politicians, so whose benefits usually gets achieved more often than West?
Who actually gets achieved? Oh, that's a good question. I didn't realise that's a question.
Yeah.
I don't think you can generalise because.
Sorry.
Go on.
So I just want to say about an example of the GDP benefits that I think there was a study about the improvement in the GDP after the financial crisis, 2009. So basically, at that time, under the Obama government in the U.S., there was some kind of few years after the crisis, people say that the GDP significantly improve. It means that the economy is doing really well, and it means that the policy that the Obama putting in place is really works in improving the GDP of the US. But then but later, many other studies they found that over 90% of increase in the GDP go to the 1% richest in the world. So again, this is a distributional effect and factor that we need to be seriously consider during the approval of the project. Because what happens is that my interviewees from my current research say that the distributional factor is overlooked, and and those new financial benefits is going to be the one that like get more attention. And sometimes the financial benefits like the GDP that improve in the economy is not maybe for the like the majority.
Yeah. There is another question. Okay. Benefits are sometimes an afterthought. Okay. Benefits are sometimes an afterthought. How can we ensure those involved in delivering policies properly consider benefits and be benefits focused? Now it's kind of trying to provide a solution here. If anyone would like to.
I'm not sure I would describe them as an afterthought, because certainly in the case of government projects and programmes, the Treasury's 5 case approach requires identification and quantification of benefits to get you over the hurdle that's necessary to get the thing approved. But I think Hassan is right about, yes, when you go into kind of delivery, our research shows that the kind of focus on benefits starts to decline as you move to that point of transition. So Terry and I had a really interesting conversation with the National Audit Office yesterday, and we're reflecting on some of the work that they've been doing around trying to look at the bigger picture of how do we connect policy intent with project delivery and then operations. And those are 3 distinct areas of the work of government and how the civil service is organised. And I think there is definitely a concern in the challenges around major projects and programmes that rely on the operational delivery profession to achieve benefits, when the policymakers are so far divorced from it. And the phrase I kind of like to use is, keeping policymakers honest. I'm not entirely convinced that we do enough really to make sure that policymakers are developing policy with, co-production, if that's the right phrase, with the operational delivery profession. That's definitely something I've observed in the space of the work we've done on prisons. There's a lot of good thinking, for sure, around prison design, but I'm not entirely convinced that those that work in those places actually are consulted on what works and what doesn't, and I include prisoners in that as well.
We've been discussing how our projects can deliver the policies that the policymakers want. And the question is raising, what happens if the policymakers want stupid things? And that does put the project manager in quite a difficult position. And we sort of assume the right thing to do is to achieve the policies that the policymakers are instructing us to do. But there is a question there. Yeah.
So I just want to touch on the 2 tensions that I discovered during my research. The first one is about, like the short political cycle and the long project life cycle. So basically, normally we only have 5 years in political cycle, and then, like we need to deliver something before the next election in order to win the vote. And it's always the pressure on the delivery team to quickly deliver something so that a positive narrative can be released. And then there is another tension, that is the tension between the very ambitious politicians and very practical delivery team. And, so this is where, it's all go wrong. And benefits is not about, and another tension that's very important is that normally when you initiate a policy, the policy kind of like quite ambiguous. It needs a lot of work to make it very clear. But then the requirement is that you always need to have a very clear plan and very clear success criteria for the project. And there is a clarity. How can the project team, the delivery team, can create something very clear if, like the policy intent, it's not that clear.
It's not that clear. Thank you very much indeed. And I know we said it's a difficult topic, it's a complex topic, and it deserves all this research that you are doing, obviously, on it with the collaboration of other researchers. We've reached the end of the broadcast. I'd like to thank you a lot Terry, Richard, and Hank for all the talk and the discussion and the answers you provided and the insights. And I'm sure because we have a large student audience, so they will be interested in looking at the published research, because they are embarking on their research journeys very soon, doing the selecting their MSc dissertations and the research. So that was very helpful. Thank you very much. Any final comments? All good?
It's our pleasure to be here today. Yeah.
Thank you for doing this today and for having the time. Okay, everyone, thank you also to our audience for your time, for watching and for listening. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until we meet again and in another podcast, please take care and enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much.